Hello, welcome to Black Men Speak. I'm your co-host, J.R. Stewart.
And I am your co-host, Tommy Duncan. It is Wednesday, July the 6th, Jimmy 2022. And if it's Wednesday night,
This is Black Men Speak. So let's give a big shout out to Liquid for our theme music and our own studio and Forest Films for providing the virtual studio and help us with some of the production. And so, Tom, what is our topic for tonight? And please introduce our guest.
all right, Jimmy. Now we have a intriguing topic for this evening, Jimmy. We can't seem to get past one thing before we get into another. We're gonna have the talk, Jimmy. We're gonna have the talk, and this is not the
Oh,
talk
the
about.
talk.
Yeah, this is not about the birds and the bees, Jimmy. This is Black
Okay.
America and law enforcement. So we're gonna talk about the most important things that you need to know when it comes to engaging with a law enforcement situation that could save your life or those of the ones you love. Obviously, we know that sometimes things happen, and I don't know that they happen as much as we might think they do based upon what you see in the media sometimes. But in that case, you have to make sure that you are armed with the right information to make
Well,
sure
that is true.
that things are moving forward. So we have two very special guests, one in law enforcement, one in the legal community that we are going to leverage and have the talk about
The
what
talk.
happens.
Okay.
Yeah, we are having the talk. So we're going to introduce our guests this evening and have them to briefly talk about what they do, and then we're going to get into the topic of our conversation. First, we will have Mr. Daryl Washington, who is a managing partner of the Washington Law Firm. Mr. Washington, how are you this evening?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you guys?
Doing outstanding. We thank you for joining us this evening.
I'm glad to be here. Glad to be here, and I'm looking forward to being a part of this conversation. I hope that we can share some things with the audience, man. That's going to really make a difference. So I'm truly looking forward to being a part of this.
Well,
All
thank you,
right,
sir, for being here.
sounds good. And we also have one of our returning guests, Brother James Hawthorne, who is the Chief of Police of the Cedar Hill
Yeah,
ISD.
Chief Hawthorne.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Also retired assistant police chief of the city of Arlington. Welcome, 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 Brother Hawthorne.
Welcome, and thank you for inviting me. I'm here with my 1-month-old daughter who's sitting in my lap that you can't
Look
see
at
right
you. Congratulations.
now. And I don't know how I was lucky enough to get on with such esteemed guest as Mr. Washington, but I'll try my best.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you taking time, and
Definitely.
congratulations. Congratulations again on the new addition to the family as well. He has
New additions, new additions.
there we go. Well, new addition. There's two twin baby girls.
Yes,
Wow.
yes,
Congratulations. Double congratulations. Okay.
yes,
Yes,
yes.
most definitely.
So why don't we do this before we get started? Brother Washington, so you are a civil rights attorney, and maybe towards the end of the show, we'll give you an opportunity to share now a little bit about what you do as a civil rights attorney, and then towards the end of the show, we'll make sure to have you to provide your information, so if anyone needs your services, they can do so. So tell us a little bit about what you do as a civil rights attorney.
Gosh, I mean, a number of things, but just to really make it very short so that I don't really bore the listening audience, my job is to protect basically what it says. I protect the civil rights of citizens. I specialize primarily in police brutality, wrongful arrests.
Okay.
I mean, as you know, we've had a number of cases just here in Dallas, cases that I'm handling involving Botham John, Genevieve Jaws, Jordan Edwards, James Harper, Clinton Allen. I mean, the list goes on. And these are all individuals who were unarmed and were victims of police excessive force. So my job as a civil rights attorney is to come in and to pursue wrongful death actions against the police officers and generally the municipality that employ the officers.
Gotcha. I appreciate that. And towards the end of the show, after we have had a chance to kind of dabble through this topic, we'll have you to provide your information so that folks who may need your service in the future can do so. And Brother Hawthorne, we know that you have a very long and stellar career in law enforcement. But tell us a little bit about what you do now and what you are responsible
Well, I've transitioned from retirement to a police chief at the Cedar Hill Independent School District. Municipal policing and school district policing, there's quite a bit of difference in those two. Uh, but it's I'm definitely learning. I can say that because school district policing is a whole different ball game. And but at the same time, there are a lot of similarities in that we have to share the responsibility of making sure that our students as well as the citizens that we serve are being served equitably, and honorably and with transparency. And a lot of times that those things don't happen, which is the reason that Mr. Washington has a job, because a lot of times as hard as we try, sometimes don't try, things go wrong, and we have police officers out there who engage in activity that is dishonorable, and and there's no place in that for that in law enforcement. And so, as a police chief, it's my responsibility to make sure when those kind of things happen, that there's transparency in the investigation, and we weed those people out, because there's no place for that in law enforcement, and just goes to undermine the integrity of our profession and everything that we work and strive for. And so I've often said this, and I'll continue to say it. I think in law enforcement, we really need to just start over from the ground floor and build up in terms of looking at who we employ as police officers, what processes that we undertake as we try to screen those individuals and look for individuals who engage in activity that is not conducive to the public's best interests, and and specifically to the interests of the African American community. And as an African American police chief, I had a responsibility to be sensitive to in that area. So that's what I try to do.
Thank you so much for sharing that information. And before we get into the meat and potatoes of our discussion, we want to thank, of course, our listeners tonight from all over the country, wherever you may be. This is a call-in show. So if you would like, feel more than free to call in and ask any questions that you may have, but we would ask that if you do call in and do have a question, if you could keep it to maybe 30 seconds, no more than a minute, so
Right.
that will give us an opportunity to allow our guests and our panelists to kind of share that insight with you as well. And also, we would ask, as opposed to waiting until the end of the show, where we have about 5 minutes.
Yes.
Yes,
Call in early.
call in
And the
early.
chat line is open also.
Exactly. Do not wait until we have 2 minutes left in the show to give us a call. But in the meantime, if you have not done so, do please subscribe to Black Men Speak, like,
Hit the
share
like button.
this
Yes.
information, absolutely, and share this information, because we are hoping and expecting that this conversation will not just be relevant tonight, but we understand that it has always been relevant to our community, and that this information would be valuable for years and decades to come. So, without that being said, what I'd like to do is start first with you, Chief and Brother Hawthorne. Talk a little bit about the law enforcement community, because one thing, as I do know, I mean, I have friends and not family members per se, but friends who've been in law enforcement community, including yourself. It is a very difficult job. It is a very dangerous job, and I think some people sometimes take for granted the work that our law enforcement community does, and then we will set that up as a context to the main topic of the conversation. What do people know about the law enforcement industry and the law enforcement community?
Well, honestly, I think there are a lot of misconceptions about the law enforcement job and what we do and how we carry out those duties. It is a tough profession. It is a tough job. It requires you to make split-second decisions, and we have to get those decisions right every time. And obviously, when we don't get it right, there are consequences. So, we undergo a lot of training to try to minimize those types of errors or mistakes. Because in my line of work, if we make a mistake, it could cost somebody their life.
Yes.
And and so we have the responsibility. The state and the law has given us the responsibility. If you think about it, we have the awesome, I don't want to say awesome, but we have a lot of power as police officers. We can take
You
away
do.
somebody's freedom. We can
Yes.
take away somebody's life. And the law gives us the authority to do that. And so when those types of decisions have to be made, we need to make sure that we get it right. And if we don't get it right, we need to put protocols in place, things in place to make sure that we get it right from then on. As Mr. Washington knows, me as the chief saying I'm sorry, that's not going to bring anybody's loved one
That
back.
is
That's not
true.
going to, do anything to satisfy, family. And even in situations where cities get sued and we have to pay out millions of dollars, that still doesn't bring the family any closure in terms of bringing their loved one back. And so we have to make sure that we get it right every time. And they're going to be hard questions. They're going to be difficult questions. And as a police chief, we should be able to answer those questions. We should anticipate hard questions, and we should be able to answer those questions. And I'll even go a step further. We should, in my opinion, engage those members of the community who often we marginalize, or those fringes of the community that sometimes we never hear from. And so, we always have the people from the Citizens on Patrol and those types of individuals. We know they're big police supporters and what they say, but if we really want to be about the community, we need to reach out to those other individuals, organizations in the community that sometimes their voices don't get heard. Their voices are minimized. They don't participate in some of those programs. And so as a police department, we have to go to them. We have to meet them where they are in their neighborhoods and engage them in ways that I would say are non-traditional, because those are the people um, who we need to connect with. Those are the voices that we really need to hear, and we really need to understand our actions on a daily basis to make sure that we are connecting in the right ways. Because oftentimes we'll think that we're doing the right thing, we're reducing crime in a neighborhood, but sometimes we're really not hitting the mark. Uh, and I'll give you an example. In my previous job, we reduced motor vehicle thefts and burglaries in a community, in a neighborhood. We thought we were doing good. We went out to a community meeting, asked them how we were doing. We thought we were going to get a positive response, but we didn't get a positive response. They said, we're thankful for the reduction in motor vehicle burglaries and thefts, but what about the prostitution? What about the thefts in the neighborhood? We don't see that you're doing anything in that. So oftentimes as police officers, we have a perception that we're doing something that's a benefit to the community, when we really need to listen to the community and connect with them in ways that are more meaningful to them, in ways that they perceive that we're having an impact on the safety in their communities. And the only way that we can do that, we have to connect with them. We can't sit behind our desks and wait for them to come to us, but we actually have to get out and engage with those members of the community who are often not heard from, or not often heard from as much as we need to connect with them.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Mr. Washington, do you see your job or what you do as adversarial, or do you simply see yourself as being a check on that authority that Mr. Hawthorne just spoke about?
Well, I mean, Chief Hawthorne said some things I think that are very important. Chief, I always try to start off by saying that uh, I know that most police officers are honorable individuals. They are good people trying to serve and protect. But oftentimes, as a civil rights attorney, I sort of have that bullseye on my chest. I'm looked upon as somebody who dislikes all police officers. And quite frankly, that's not the case at all. I dislike bad police officers. I
Yeah,
dislike dishonest
yeah.
police officers. And I will tell you, most police officers, most experts who I come in contact with also dislike bad police officers. They also like dishonest police officers.
Hmm.
The one thing that I like to be able to see is just more transparency. Chief, one of the things that I truly admire is when I'm looking at a bad shooting, a shooting that we know that is bad, and you have a chief that comes on television and he owns up to it. You know, he forgets about the political side. He forgets about what the city attorney, the notes that the city attorney is giving him. He forgets about the backlash that he's going to get from the city council, and comes out and directly say, this was not good. This person did not deserve to die. And I think when you hear those type of things, this is what helped to heal the community. And quite frankly, we're not getting this. I'll give you an example. We had the incident, horrible incident that just took place in Highland Park, Illinois. All right. Less than 48 hours, there's been 7 counts of murder handed down. I mean, no question. Chief, when I look at what happened with this young kid who was shot 60 times, he was fired upon over 90 times, and the evidence has already come out that there was no gun. The gun was in the car. And, you know, we hear, the public has to hear that the officers are going to basically be placed on paid leave, pending investigation. And oftentimes, Chief, we look at this, the purpose of having body cam video is so that the experts, individuals like yourself and other people who are in charge, can know what happened. And I really don't think it takes that long oftentimes to be able to come out to the public to say that what happened was criminal. We know that, let's just look at this case and let's analyze it. Let's just say for a second, shots 1, 2, and 3 may have been justified. There is nothing that I saw on that video that would have said that shots 4 through 90 were not excessive. And when you see these officers not being immediately arrested, I think these are the things that cause problems in our community. And this is where we have to come in, and we have to be advocates for the family. We have to really fight for the family to somehow try to get them justice, because we know we've seen so many times when there's been body cam video, when the evidence has been very clear, we've seen officers walk. And because of that, I think this is what makes it very bad on the entire system.
So, Mr. Washington, if I may, 'cause I know Tommy got another question, but while we're on this topic really quick, I just got a follow up. So being former military myself in special forces, our rules for deadly force or engagement are a little different than law enforcement officers. But when you're in the dark chasing someone who's already fired on you, and you try to use a little less deadly force with a taser, that doesn't work, and now you see a person that you perceive to be a threat to you by reaching into their pocket, belt buckle, whatever it's reaching for. At what point do you think a person is supposed to exercise some due diligence and risk their life? That's what you're basically calling officers to do. Like Chief Hawthorne said, you have a split second to make a decision as to and think about whether you're going home or not.
Right.
We've seen other incidents where cops have been shot engaging with shooters, and so if it's your life, at what point you say 3 bullets is okay, but 4th bullet, 4 through 90, it's excessive. But when it's your life and you don't know, I mean, how do you quantify 4 to be excessive in that
All
situation?
right, let me tell you how I would evaluate a case like this, and Chief Hawthorne could join in whenever you want. Okay. There's a training term that we know, it's called conceal and cover. Okay, so the way I would look at this case is, if I thought somebody had a gun, if I thought that somebody was firing the gun, the last thing that I would do is approach the vehicle. So that gave me some concerns, the fact that they engaged him that way. Secondly, I have not seen too many cases, and I have not been a part of too many training where I've heard of individuals tasing or attempting to tase individuals as they run away. And when I look at this body cam video, I did not see anyone using the taser. So again, those are some of the stories that we've heard over and over. What was the urgency? Why did they have to chase him? They had his car. They pretty much probably knew who he was. what was the urgency? Why was there a need to escalate that situation like this? And I think this is one of the reasons why a lot of departments throughout the country now have no pursuit policies. Because not only does it place the victim or the suspect in danger, but it places the officers in danger as well, especially in a situation like this. So again, you're going to have a lot of people, and we face this with juries all the time, and quite often the victims are prejudiced by it. You have individuals who will say, why did he run? If he'd only just listened, none of this would have happened. And we have to talk our way through this all the time. And I just don't think you look at it that way. Chief will tell you there's a case, Supreme Court case, Tennessee versus Garner. And every police officer, I can assure you, they're familiar with it. And in Tennessee Garner, it talks about shooting or using deadly
Fleeing
force
felon.
on the fleeing felon. So again, that's going to be very important. But the thing that you look at, I understand that it's dark, but the one thing that we're going to look at, and Chief will tell you this, it doesn't matter what this gentleman did 5 minutes before the shooting, or it doesn't matter what the officers did 5 minutes before the shooting. The officers could have violated every policy that there is. What the court is going to look at is at the time that those officers made that decision to use deadly force, was it reasonable? And when you look at was it reasonable, not was it reasonable to those officers, would it have been reasonable to another officer in the same circumstances that these officers found themselves in? So it's going to be, it's going to be a very tough case. Again, if you had officers who fired 2 or 3 times, I think we may be looking at a different scenario. But the fact that you hear over 90 shots, I just don't think it was justified, especially when this gentleman was on the ground as they fired, was not pointing the weapon at them. I don't know how you justify or explain that one.
And
Yeah,
Brother
if I could weigh in on that too, I think Mr. Washington is exactly correct. When you look at the circumstances, and I'm not as familiar with this case, I apologize. I hadn't really read up on it. I know it's been in the news a lot, but it really doesn't matter because at the end of the day, that's what we weigh. Like just Mr. Washington just said, at the time that the officers decided to fire and shoot. And I would go back as a police chief. My initial question would be, well, why are we chasing him? What are we chasing him for? And if you say it's a traffic stop, we've already identified this individual is not a felony crime in progress or something like that, then I would have a lot of questions as to why we're even engaging him in that manner in the first place, because we have his identity. We know who he is. And we have every opportunity in the world to resolve that situation later in a different perspective. And I think what happens a lot of times, at least from my experience that I've seen, we have to question police training and question this what I call the warrior mentality, as opposed to say the guardian or protector mentality that officers sometimes engage in, and the warrior mentality. Certainly, in my opinion, is a lot more aggressive. It views police officers as engaged fighters, engaging in a community in a way that I don't think that police officers should be viewed as. We're not the army coming in overtaking a community. We're there to protect the community. And so, in the case that you just talked about, I'd have a lot of questions as chief as to why are we engaging in this individual in the first place. And then if I find, as in this case, we fired over 90 rounds or so at this individual, that's problematic, especially if we later figure out that this person didn't have a gun. Then what type of threat did he pose? And I do believe in those situations, as a police chief, you have to have a lot of courage. It's not going to make you friends with your law enforcement peers or the employees who you're in charge of. But I think you have to have courage, and you have to step out and say, hey, this was wrong. We have to own it, and we have to figure out a way to fix it. and there has to be transparency through every step of the way. That I can't emphasize that enough. There has to be transparency through the investigation to give the public the confidence that we're going to do the right thing and we're not just going to sweep it under the rug, because we've seen too many times in our history, especially as it relates to the African American community, things that have been swept under the rug or, painted differently. A police report that is written in a way that doesn't match the facts of what happened at the scene. And thank God for body cameras, and thank God for
Yeah.
cell phones and video, because a lot of these things have come to light. And it's a stain or a black eye on our profession when we have people that are not honorable and write dishonest police reports or engage in activity that's not justified. And as a police chief or as an investigation agency, we can't justify bad behavior. We
So,
should never
Chief, let me
try to justify
let
bad
me let me ask
behavior.
you this follow up question. Then I'll let Tommy move on. I promise. Um, Shots fired. And basically, what I'm hearing is that maybe we shouldn't rush the car when shots are fired. Person gets out and run. Maybe you shouldn't chase them because you have the identity of the person, you have the car. But what if that person runs and then victimizes somebody else and shoots them? Then what do you tell that family when they say you had a chance to stop this person and put him down? I would be still living, or some loved one of mine would still be living if you had. How do
Well,
you justify not chasing a person when shots have been fired? You don't know what the person's armed or not. It's dark.
I don't
Person
I
has a
don't know the,
mask on. They're
yeah,
running.
I don't know the particular facts in this particular case, but just like I go back to, I think Mr. Washington said it perfectly. At the end of the day, what are the facts about this particular individual's behavior? I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know, say, if
Right.
I'm
It's their
chasing
decision to make
somebody.
that decision.
Wait a sec, Jim. Wait a sec.
Okay.
Go ahead, brother.
Oh no, I'm just saying I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know if this guy is going to go out and shoot other individuals, or if he's just simply trying to get away from us because he got a warrant for his arrest. And so I can't base my actions. I can't justify deadly force on what somebody might do. I have to base my actions on what that person does. And we arrest people every day that are armed. We arrest people every day that are dangerous. We arrest people every day that have knives and in violent situations. And we are trained to arrest them, bring them into custody, and do it safely without any harm to the officers or any harm to the individual that we're trying to
I
effect the
agree.
arrest on. And so we have to go back to that type of training and do what we're trained to do. And it's always, you can always speculate and say, well, this guy may have had a gun and he was running, and so he may shoot somebody. Well, I can't justify deadly force based on that. That goes back to what Mr. Washington said, the Supreme Court case, Garner versus the state of Tennessee. I mean, you can't shoot a fleeing felon just because he's a fleeing felon, and particularly in the circumstances that y'all have articulated. So I think every case has to be judged on its merits and on the facts and circumstances that are associated with it. And you can't get into this situation where you start projecting, well, if I didn't do this, it's the same with a DWI, right? We're chasing a DWI. And so when does the thought process come in that continuing this chase does further harm, does further poses further jeopardy to the public, as opposed to terminating the pursuit? Damned if you do, damned if you don't. But in a lot of situations like that, we do choose to terminate the pursuit because the risk is too great to the public at that point, to justify going any further. So you have to always weigh those circumstances out, and I believe they're case by case situation. But you have to act on the facts that are given to you at that particular time.
Gotcha. Well,
And
why don't we do this? We are about halfway into the show, and we definitely want to make sure that we tackle a couple of other things that are a little bit more narrow. And I would say this: I just find it very interesting when we look at, to our points in some of these high-profile cases, that the shooters, and let's just say the murderers in the Buffalo and Chicago shootings, murders, somehow were arrested, unhurt, in handcuffs, and they get to go to jail and trial. The gentleman in Akron hadn't killed anybody. The gentleman in Tulsa had, but for whatever reason, they don't get a chance to go to trial for their cases. And it just seems like there are two sets of rules depending on who's being apprehended. But let's get to the things that we need to talk to our listeners about. And that is, what are the things that we need to be talking about when we talk about the talk between Black America and the law enforcement community? Because we definitely want to get to some resolution to some issues here. Maybe it's just me, but I think that there are two sets of rules. Whether there are two sets of rules or not, and when I say two sets of rules, one set of rules for Black America, one set of rules for white America when it comes to law enforcement. What do our listeners and what does the Black community need to know about engagement with law enforcement? Whether these are elders talking to younger people, quite frankly, whether these are, it could be a grandmother who may have a son who has a mental health issue and it's a domestic call and it ends up not so good, which has happened before. What are the top things that we need to know about engaging with the law enforcement community? Because the key here is minimizing things like this happening. I'll start with you, Mr. Washington, and then we'll just kind of navigate back between yourself and Chief Hawthorne.
Tommy, I'll be honest, man. If you asked me this same question 4 or 5 years ago, I probably would have a much different answer. Because there are so many unarmed Black men and women who were complying with the commands of officers who ended up dead. You look at Botham John, he was in his apartment eating ice cream, not committing a penal offense. He ended up dead. What could I have told Botham different in that situation? Or 15-year-old Jordan Edwards, who was shot in the head with a high-power rifle by a Box Springs police officer. So you have those situations where no matter what you're doing, a bad officer is going to do something bad. But here's what I would say. Officers have a saying when I'm at trial, and 99.9% of them, Chief Hawthorne, says this, the same thing. I just want to get home to my family. When they made that decision to shoot. And it works oftentimes with the jury. What I would tell the listening audience, I would tell you to have that same thought process, that you just want to get home to your family. And if you ever confront with a bad police officer, I say this all the time, I'd rather be calling you at trial as a witness live than to be calling a representative of your estate. So whatever we have to do to make sure that you make it home alive, let's do it. I've seen a lot of videos. I've seen a lot of videos where people want to cite the Constitution to these officers, and you want to talk back. I'll tell you, I've been pulled over, Chief, over some very suspicious reasons. But when a police officer pulls me over, especially when I'm on a country road late at night, that's just not the time for me to talk about the Constitution. I'll say what I need to say. I'll get my ticket and I'll try to get out of there as fast as possible. Because I will tell you, a bad police officer is looking for you to do something to spark him or her. So you do whatever you have to do not to have any type of interactions with these individuals. Especially, if this guy has a gun and you don't have a gun, it's just, you're at a disadvantage, first of all. So again, have as little interaction as possible. Get your ticket if you're being stopped for something, and just leave. If this person acted disrespectful, let me deal with it later.
Yes.
That's the advice that I can give you. Remember, I always say this, Tommy, you have a right to remain silent. And whenever I talk to young high school students, I tell them this same thing. Remember, you have a right to remain silent. Exercise that right. This is not no time to try to talk yourself out of any type of potential trouble. This is not the time to try to talk yourself out of any ticket. Let us do this. This is what we are trained to do. Again, my goal as a civil rights attorney, my goal is not to make a lot of money at this. My goal is to hopefully one day not have to practice civil rights law. And I'm not having to practice because we've made a difference. Because again, I'm not a hero going out and getting your family a multi-million-dollar settlement or verdict. I don't view myself as a hero. I view myself as a hero if I've given you the tools that you need to be able to make it to 30 and to make it to 40 and to make it to 50. That's then I would view myself as making a difference. And again, I just see so many things happen that I think they could have gone a different way. And this is just a conversation that told me just 1 hour is just not enough. I'll stop right there, but I can, man, we could talk about this. Probably Chief will tell you this. This could be 8 hours of conversation, all the things that we're talking about today, and that probably wouldn't be enough.
But we're going to get it done definitely within the next 30 minutes. So I pulled a couple of things out of that. Chief, what say you in terms of, you know?
Well, I would agree exactly with Mr. Washington, and I think you and I talked about this previously, Tommy. At the end of the day, you're just trying to survive the encounter. You know, you do whatever it takes, and as we talked, you know, you may have a warrant for your arrest. You may have whatever. You're about to go to jail or whatever. And you don't want to go to jail. Nobody wants to be taken into custody. But, you know, at the same time, trying to fight your way out of that situation, trying to run from the police in that situation when you know you have a warrant. And so many of these videos, these situations that I've seen, somebody has had a warrant for their arrest. They didn't want to go to jail, so they ran from the police or decided they were going to fight the police. And you know, let's just be honest. I have a son who's a grown man now, but when he was coming up and I was assistant police chief over in Arlington, you know, I had the same conversation that we're talking about now, how to survive that encounter. You know, and I tell him, you know, at 2 o'clock in the morning, you get stopped by the police, you're not going to win that pissing match. You're just not going to win it. So it's just not advisable to try to get in somebody's face, argue your way out of that situation. That's why you have an attorney. At least what I used to tell him, that's why your dad is assistant police chief. Let me fight that battle, because I know how to fight that battle a lot better than you if somebody's done something wrong to you. But we got to train and educate our community, these young men and young ladies, to not put themselves in those kind of situations. And I agree with Daryl. I mean, I used to say when people would have these kind of conversations with people, I'd say, you know, compliance is the answer, you know. And I still do believe compliance is
It
the
is.
best
I agree
answer.
with you.
But, you know, we've seen a lot of situations where people have been compliant 100%.
Right.
And
And
they should be
still,
punished to the maximum extent of the law.
bad things happen to
Yes.
them. But that doesn't mean that compliance is not the answer or not the best option. It still is the best option. And I would rather you do that than I heard a young lady talk to me the other day about advice that she was giving her son and her children and her family, and the advice that she was giving them: if stopped by the police, run. And I said, you know, that's never a good option. That's never good advice. And so,
And so
you know, we got to stop
she actually told
teaching
her
or
children to
training
run.
young people.
Yeah. Not good advice.
Wow.
Well,
Not good
and
advice.
Tommy, let me just say,
And
Go ahead.
no, go ahead, Chief. Go ahead, Chief. Chief wasn't finished.
no, I really was finished. I was just, you know, going to say, you know, I'm a black man too, right? And I know how I'm treated when I'm in uniform, and I know how I'm treated when I'm not in uniform. I know how I'm
Right.
treated when I'm in a uniform at my department and when I'm at the police department. You know, so the same experiences that other people of the community have, I can identify with that. I can identify that in a way that I've had those same experiences myself. And so when I tell people how to avoid those types of situations, I'm speaking from experience. I'm speaking from
Right.
my own personal experience, and I'm speaking from what I know as a police chief, you know, in a major metropolitan area. And so I still think compliance is best, and we have to not put ourselves in situations or put ourselves in harm's way, because if we're not running from the police or not fighting the police because we don't want to go to jail because we got that warrant, then we don't run the risk of getting shot, accidentally have a gun shoot us when they say, oh, we were trying to tase him instead. You know, with those things don't happen. So I'm sorry, Derek. Go ahead, and because I didn't mean to cut you off either.
No, Chief, I actually was cutting you off, and I apologize about that. But Tommy, I have a lot of friends who are police officers. Chief said something earlier about police officers having a lot of authority. One of those authorities is that, I mean, they can take your freedom or they can take your life. And that's a lot of power. And there are individuals who don't know how to use that power. I was talking to a friend of mine. He's a Black police officer. And by the way, I'll use this as a shameless plug, basically, Chief, to say I think we do need more Black police officers. We need more Black police officers in our Black communities, especially. I can count on one hand how many issues I've had with Black police officers when it comes to deadly and excessive force. And when I talk to Black officers, I mean, I've had some who have told me point blank, Daryl, if I pulled out my gun and shot that person, I would have been justified based on the interaction that I was having with this person. But I know that that individual did not have a gun. And, we just fought. I fought him and I was able to get him under compliance. He said, but I could have easily killed him. He said, but I knew the guy from the community. And, lots of times they see guys in the community and they talk to them and they tell them, man, what are you doing? And they just have these real conversations. And a lot of these guys have respect. But you have a lot of these officers, non-Black officers, who are going into our communities and mishandle and mistreat these guys. Chief, we did an open records request. And I pulled where it was African-American guys who were suspected of selling drugs. And you look at their arrest photos, and 95% of those guys' arrest photos, they were beaten really bad. And by these officers, and you're like, man, what is going on? But you have these officers who go out to the community, they have this natural high where they want to find guys with drugs, they beat these guys, they mistreat these guys. So when we say, why did you run? You got to understand, there is a major fear. When you are watching people basically shot 90 times, when you are watching an officer with his knee on George Floyd's back, like it's no big deal. When you see Eric Garner in New York, when you see Black men being killed by police officers, it's hard for me to tell another Black man what he should and should not be afraid of. You actually have people who have that fear. I mean, I've seen videos where guys were stopped by officers and they were basically crying, basically asking the officer not to hurt them. I mean, real fear, tears coming out their eyes. And man, when I see that, that is just very hard to watch, because again, I think bad police officers give a black eye to all good police officers. And Chief, one of the things I would like to see happen, and I know this is very difficult. I think one of the hardest things for a good, honest police chief are these strong police unions. I think these police unions a lot of time make it very difficult for a police chief to operate the way they truly want. I mean, a lot of police chiefs really want to do the right thing, man. But when you have these police unions that come in and give a no vote of confidence and do all this, it undermines the process. When you have police unions that are coming out publicly talking against a decision that was made by a police chief, it makes the process really bad. I had a situation in San Antonio, Chief, where the chief of police came out and he point blank said what this officer did was wrong. I mean, the police union got involved and the police chief came back a week or so later and said that, you know, he made the statement too early and that the investigation was ongoing and it was a premature statement. But it was because of the pressure that the police union puts on these officers, and that's the thing that I think that makes this system really bad.
Yeah, no, I agree, and we see that time and time again. We saw it recently here locally in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, where one of the chiefs here fired an officer, and within a couple of days, it was a bad shooting. The guy has been indicted for murder. He fired the officer within a couple of days, and then you're exactly right. The police unions came after him, had a vote of no confidence on him, said he's not a good police chief and wanted him gone when he did the right thing. And one of the things that I've always said as a police chief, I believe I can survive the heat from internally, but you can't survive the heat from the
Externally.
community if you're not doing the right thing. You have to
Gotcha.
do what's right by the community and not necessarily be swayed by the unions. But Daryl is exactly right. These unions make it very, very, very difficult for police chiefs who want to do the right thing to do the right thing,
Okay,
because
with that. Oh, I'm
stand by
sorry. Go ahead.
no matter what. You know.
Go
So with
ahead.
that being said, let's kind of get back to some life-saving tips here. So I
Go.
agree that compliance is your best choice. But Mr. Washington, you brought up a point where you said you speak to young people and you mentioned to them that to keep the zip it, to keep your mouth shut. I guess if you're pulled over, you have to self-identify to be on the road. You have to have a legal car, insurance, registration, inspection. You don't have to answer questions about where you're going or where you came from. But if you invoke the right to be silent, be silent. Don't say anything else after that, other than what you have to, which is the minimum. So I have a nephew who's a knucklehead. Get pulled over and he wants to invoke the right to be silent, but then he's cursing at the cop, gets arrested for assault, and I'm asking him, how smart is it for you to be fighting with a cop? He said, Uncle, I didn't fight with him. I just told him F you. Well, I guess that was enough for an assault charge. But he said, I'm going to beat this because I exercised my right to be silent. It's like you gave up that right as soon as you opened your mouth again. So if you're going to be silent, be silent. But we need to make sure that if our young kids are going to try to engage in some legal win with cops, please understand what your limits are. And the best thing for you to do is not to be trying to play lawyer out there on the road, especially with no lights or dark or no other witnesses around. Be compliant. Keep your mouth shut. If the officer does anything wrong, just ask for their name and badge number, and then go file a complaint afterwards. And if you have a warrant, you need to really, we need to get serious as a community to go voluntarily and go deal with these things before the officer pulls you over, and now society is forcing you to deal with a warrant. Don't wait till you get pulled over. It's too late at that point. If you know you have warrants for, especially for traffic stuff, man, go voluntarily go down there, pay the fine, work something out. Nobody wants to throw you in jail. But if they have to pull you over in the middle of the road, you may find yourself in jail when you could have just went down there voluntarily and dealt with it. So we need to
Let me
start teaching our young people to be responsible when dealing with law enforcement. You have legal issues, go deal with them.
And do
Don't sit there and hide and run and put yourself in a position where you don't want to go to jail and then be fearful and do something crazy that may result in you losing your life.
And
let me
if I
say,
could, and I'm going to
okay.
go to Mr. Washington. I'm going to summarize what I've actually highlighted 5 things, very very poignant between all of you, and then we can go to you, Mr. Washington. We have about 10 minutes left. First and foremost, don't give law enforcement a reason to either arrest you, hurt you, or potentially shoot. I mean,
Correct.
that's the first and most important thing. Do not give them a reason, whatever that is. Don't give them a reason to do something that you don't want to happen. Number 2, you do have rights, and probably the most important one is to invoke your right to remain silent, which could possibly solve a lot of problems. Number 3, don't run from the situation. Chief Hawthorne said that a little bit earlier. Regardless
Correct.
of what the situation is, probably not a good thing to run from the situation. It doesn't turn out bad, especially for folks who look like those of us who are on this call. Be compliant. I think everyone is pretty much agreed with be compliant to whatever they're saying, which mitigates risk. And then one of the things that was kind of mentioned lightly, but may be very important that we can dig into for a few minutes is get to know the force that is responsible for your neighborhood. Otherwise, get to know the officers. So if for whatever reason you encounter them, you already have a relationship in place, which possibly mitigates some of the risk involved. So those are 5 things that I picked up right there. Don't give them a reason to do something bad to you. Invoke your right to remain silent. You do have a right. Don't run from the situation. Be compliant, and then get to know the police force. Mr. Washington, go ahead, and then we're going to wrap up a few more things
Hey,
because
I
we
don't
have.
know if you guys, I apologize, can hear me, but I have some audio anymore. I
No,
can't
we can
hear
see
you.
and hear
So
you.
We can hear you.
Yeah,
I apologize. I'm still here.
We can hear you. Okay, Mr. Washington.
Tommy, the one thing I was going to say, and I just have to say this because, I've said the things that I think we need to be able to do in order to make it home at night or during the day, but I don't want to take off I think, a main responsibility that should be placed on the municipalities. Officers take an oath to serve and protect.
They do.
And I think it's so very unfair for individuals to have to do all these things in order to be able to make it home at night. I think
It
the
is.
city has.
You're
I
correct.
think the city has an obligation to make sure that they're having monthly, quarterly, or yearly mental evaluation of police officers. Quite frankly, you have police officers who out there are just they're not stable, man. I can tell you, I've taken some deposition of police officers, and I honestly thought the person was crazy. I was like, man, how is this person walking around with a gun and a badge? Can somebody not see that this person has issues? Could somebody not see that Roy Oliver was going to take somebody's life? I mean, all those things were very obvious. The one thing I will tell people to do, and this is so very important, I know Chief would agree with me. Oftentimes, people are mistreated by police officers. They're wrongfully stopped. They're talked in a very bad manner.
Oh, yes, that's true.
Police officers
Right.
treat them wrong. Then the police officer let them go, right?
Right.
And the biggest mistake that we make is not going down to file a complaint.
That's correct.
All
100%.
right. You
Yes.
have to, if you're being mistreated by a police officer, please, please, please file a complaint, because we want to make sure that we paper that person's file. We want to make sure that that person is not going to be someone, when he takes somebody's life, that they're going to say that it's this person's first time doing something. So we
Correct.
want to make sure that you report this person. Man, we all need to come together. And Chief, I say this, oftentimes, I talk to my friends, Black police officers, and I know, man, it's very difficult because they have a job. We all have a job, and I know we look at them and we ask them to do things that may be tough at times. But I would love one day, Chief, to see all our Black police officers throughout this country come in unity to say that, we need to weed out these bad police officers.
We
We
do.
don't need them to be a part of the force, because they know, a lot of times they know the bad police officers. They
Right.
know the ones that are doing bad things. But because you have this fraternity, it's very difficult oftentimes for people to step outside of this. But
Right.
again,
Right.
it's hard for me not to take the blame away from a lot of these municipalities who are not properly training police officers. A lot of police officers are they are trained to kill. I was looking in Michigan, Chief. It was a police chief who just came out, and you can Google that. He issued an apology to the public because in their training, they were using pictures of Black men for
I heard
their
about that.
target training. You heard about that, Chief? They were using Black men for target practice. And when you put this thing into an officer's mind, I think that is very dangerous. Another thing that is very dangerous is the fact that the legal system protects so many bad police officers. So what that is doing is that's giving a lot of police officers the courage to feel that I can take a Black man's life and not get into trouble. I'm not sure if I lost you guys, Tommy.
No, you haven't.
I can't
I
hear
think the
Tommy.
chief. Tommy's not speaking. Well, he was speaking.
Yeah, I
Okay,
can't hear
I
Tommy.
do have a gentleman. I do have a caller on the line.
Okay,
He would like to ask a brief question.
shoot.
You would tell us who you are, where you're from, the question that you would have. If you could keep it to within about 30 or so seconds, as we have about 5 minutes left.
Hey, Attorney Washington, it's Attorney Patterson. Hey, this is Alicia Patterson. I was just, me as the prosecutor, I'm just wondering what we can do, because I engage the law enforcement to be better about, talking to our officers. And then I'm a big advocate for training for officers. What can we do as people in law enforcement to kind of push the change forward so we don't see some of the bad things?
Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Patterson.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and I think that the essence of the question is being on the offensive as opposed to the reactive. What can the community, what can folks in her position do to help better train officers and or engage officers to mitigate the risk of bad outcomes?
I mean, one of the things, and I could just speak from the community side, Tommy, we have these cases. The community is in the uproar for two to 3 weeks. Then we go back to status quo. I think what we need to do is, as a community, because whenever the community comes together, you get change. We can't do it by ourselves, but we need to hold city council members. We need to hold police chiefs. We need to hold mayors. We need to hold all the elected officials accountable. We need to let them know that we're not going to tolerate this. We're not going to allow you to protect these bad police officers. Tommy, I had cities spend millions of dollars to defend bad police officers, and they're using taxpayers' dollars to defend these bad police officers. Right now, Roy Oliver was convicted of murder for killing Jordan Edwards. He was fired, Chief, by Bark Springs Police Department, yet this guy has legal representation. They're paying for his legal representation right now. So, that type of stuff encourages bad police officers. I mean, I just think that just needs to really end. I think police officers need to be treated like regular citizens. I'm glad that here in Dallas, they got rid of the 72-hour rule that an officer did not have to say anything for 72 hours. I mean, but Tommy, it's so much, man, that we can talk about. I'm trying to.
And I want the chief to respond as well. What are your thoughts, Chief Hawthorne? We can't hear you. You're on mute. Chief, you're on mute. If you can hear us, Chief, you are on
I think
mute.
they have some connection issues because he's dropped out a couple of times.
Okay, good deal. I'll tell you what, why don't we do this? We have a couple of minutes left, Jimmy, and hopefully we'll be able to get the audio for Chief Hawthorne. He is jumping off and jumping back on, because what I'm hearing, Mr. Washington, is, I mean, let's break this down to an individual level. Usually we are responding to emotions, either fear when we are stopped, and especially in our community, or anger as a response to something that has happened. And so we've talked about, at least 5 or 6 different things, because you did add, and I want to thank you for that, filing complaints when there is abuse by the law enforcement officer in this particular case, because I mean, there is no reason that Derek Chauvin should have been in a position to do what he did. But a lot of times bad things happen. People do not file complaints. So as opposed to being on the defensive, what are things that the community can do, the Black community in particular, so that we are operating on the offense and we are operating proactively as opposed to reactively, and you just see protests?
We just need to continue, Tommy, to be a part of the legal system, the process, man. We need the community involved in this. That is so very important. And I tell you this in 15 seconds if I can. I can't tell you how many times, man, we have prepared for trial. We have prepared for trial, and we are all ready to try to get this police officer, the jury to rule against the police officer, but we're doing all we need to do. It comes time to select a jury. And I'm looking out at the jury pool, and I see people that look just like me. And I'm just saying to myself, man, I surely hope that the Black people do not do anything to eliminate themselves from the jury. and the judge asked the one question, is there any reason why someone cannot serve on a jury? And almost 95% of the time, man, people who look like me, people who look like the victim raises their hand. And that makes it so very difficult for us to get justice here in this country. I think we need to, it's just we're gonna need the Black pastors, we need the Black leaders, everybody to come together and have these type of conversations, teach people what do they need to do to be able to serve on juries, the things that they shouldn't be saying that's gonna eliminate them. It's just a whole process, man, that we can just talk about for hours. And I just hope that we just continue this conversation.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I do see Chief Hawthorne back on. I don't know that we have him on mute. Jimmy, I don't know if there's a way that you can control the mute button for Chief Hawthorne. It looks like we may not have his audio.
No, he has an audio signal,
Okay,
so you can look at the green bars there. So um, there's nothing on our side blocking his audio. So
gotcha,
I think it's just bandwidth of connection.
gotcha.
So,
Okay.
but we're at the end of the top of the hour anyway, Tom. So we can go ahead and kind of wind down. Um,
And why don't we do this? Maybe we can have a closing comment, and I think this is the beginning of the conversation, not the end. But again, kind of summarizing what we have. Obviously, when we talk about, having that talk, whether it's someone within your family, a friend, or whatever the case is, the key things is, one, you do have rights, and probably the first and most important is you have a right to be silent. No one can force you to give up your rights. Number two, don't give anyone a reason when you interact with law enforcement to arrest you, hurt you, or potentially shoot you. Don't run from the situation, even if you are afraid. It's, understand that naturally human response is human response, but don't run from the situation. Be compliant. Obviously, I think that helps mitigate risk. And then on the proactive side, know the police force that is responsible for and serves your community, and then file complaints when you see an abuse of power on behalf of law enforcement, so that this is recorded and codified, so that we have folks like Mr. Washington here, who have something to work with when they have to go after that cops. Because the key is to make sure that they are serving and protecting our communities, not containing and controlling.
yeah, and if I may, Tom, I'd like to add two things to that list. Um, One, if you get pulled over, you are being temporarily detained. So you don't have to ask the officer if am I being detained. The next thing is don't ask too many questions because they may see that as interfering with their job. Go ahead and comply, get through the process, get home, go the next day and file a complaint if you have to. If the officer in any way did anything wrong that you, even if it's not wrong, if you just think it's wrong, go file a complaint anyway. Let someone know what this officer did. Um, so the most important thing is you get home and you get back to your family safely.
Okay, and we do have one text question that we have, and that
Oh
is,
yeah, show up for jury duty.
yeah, yeah,
I
the other
agree.
issue.
Mr. Washington was right. Don't be opting out. We need our folks on the jury pool, on that jury committee, because if you're not there, then don't be upset about the outcome if you're not there to voice your concern and have your voice heard.
I do have one other question that came from a listener. It says, what can we do when confronted with an unstable, afraid, racist cop that is just hell bent on hurting or killing
Yeah,
us?
you better
Nothing?
pray.
Nothing?
Uh, Nothing, not much. Do your best to pray your way out of that and
Well, I
de-escalate the
mean,
best you can.
but using your communication and your tools. If you have someone that just has it out for you, engaging them, is there a way to engage them that helps to neutralize or to de-escalate the situation?
See, man, this is why this is such a hard conversation, because citizens aren't trained. We don't go
Right.
through weeks of de-escalation training. These
Correct.
are things that officers are supposed to be doing. They are
That's
trained
correct.
to be courteous, to be polite, and to de-escalate situations. But unfortunately, man, you have so many cowards who are wearing a badge and carrying a gun. And it's not really a training issue. it's a race issue. I mean, as much as we want to try to deny it, I have seen too many times when officers have detained white men who were armed and didn't use force. And you know what's the sad thing about it when you really think about it? Officers have more fear of an unarmed black man
They
than
do.
they do of an
That's
armed
what the
white
studies
man.
show. You're correct.
And,
That,
you know, when I look at it, as long as we are alive, as long as we are black men, it doesn't matter whether we have a gun because that dangerous weapon is the color of our skin. And that is the most frustrating thing. And I'll be honest, man, it is so frustrating sometimes when, you know, I'm having these conversations and I'm, you know, hearing how people have to talk to a racist police officer. It almost brings your mind back to the slave days. And you know, I just hope that we can get rid of those type of police officers.
yes, we need it as fast as we can. I agree with you 100%. But the first strategy, get home, so
Get
someone like you
home.
is not filing a wrongful death suit. Um,
I agree.
so I rather you following us down there fighting because a cop was abusive, abused their authority, and we're trying to get rid of them versus having to bury you and then come back and file a suit against the city. Not that I'm trying to put you out of work, Mr. Washington, but
Hey
you
man,
know,
put me out of work. That's the type of work I want to be out of. You know,
I
it's
do, I do have Chief Hawthorne on the line, and I'm going to give him the opportunity to respond to the question that was just raised by one of our listeners. And Brother Hawthorne, Chief Hawthorne, the question was, when you come across a bad apple in the law enforcement community that is hell bent on doing something bad to you, up to and including killing you, what can you do? What leverage do you have? What can you do to potentially de-escalate or neutralize the situation so you can get home alive to your family?
Right. Well, I want to apologize first because I don't know what happened to my connection and I just could not get in. So I apologize for having to drop
No
out.
problem.
I'll go back because I could hear you guys talking, and one of the things that are really important when we have bad apple police officers is important. It's imperative that if you have a bad interaction with any police officer for whatever reason it didn't feel right. You think he was discourteous, and you may think nothing's ever going to come of the complaint or nothing like that. File the complaint. It helps us build a paper trail that we need in order to build our documentation on a case. Because you have to understand, they're cops; they have due process rights. There's a whole lot of things that have to be in place in order for us to fire somebody. You just can't fire them. We have to go by the law and what the rules are for the state of Texas in terms of terminating officers. But it starts with filing a complaint. It helps us to build a case to know, because I've been on police department where we know we had bad officers, and then somebody comes in and files a complaint, and they say, well, this guy's doing this, that, and the other, and we want to discipline him, and we look at it in his jacket, and there's no complaint. And so it's imperative that we do that just to build the record. And then I think the other piece of that, if I'm a police chief, I know I have a bad apple. We're going to do everything in our power to get rid of that individual. Again, they do have due process rights and the processes that you have to go through, but it's imperative upon me to make that recognition and build my case, even if it's not through a paper trail that I have externally. I can certainly start to build a paper trail internally on things that I have observed, behavior that I've seen, and then execute it that way. Those cases are a little bit more difficult to do, but it's imperative that we do it. And if you're in a situation like that, and you're confronted with a guy, you're on the street, and you believe that's the guy that you got, just like we said earlier, you just have to do everything that you do to survive that encounter.
Right. How do you what are best practices if you're in the moment, you've been stopped, you're in a bad place, whether it's a rural town or in a dark place in the city, in a bad area, and you just think you got that guy, the bad apple, and you are trying to de-escalate and neutralize that situation so you can get home to your family. What
Right,
do you,
and
what do you do?
and Tom, I've been in that situation before I was a police officer, and I've been in that situation once I was a police officer. And you're absolutely right, and it goes back to you do everything that you can in that moment to minimize any potential situation of somebody having to use force on you.
How do you do
Whatever.
that? What do you do?
Well, I mean, the police officers are supposed to be the ones that are trained, but we train in that particular situation. If you're a citizen, do not escalate the situation. Don't give them, like you said earlier, don't give them an excuse. They ask for your license, give it to them. And I think most importantly, exercise your right at that point to be silent.
Right,
Don't
I agree.
escalate the situation. De-escalate the situation by not trying to get into a tit for tat with this individual because it's not going to go well. So de-escalate the situation. Exercise your right to remain silent. Be compliant. We know they have body cameras, and so if that situation were to go wrong, there's video evidence that an attorney can get to show that their actions were not justified. But do whatever you can to survive the encounter.
So if I'm hearing you correct, it is in essence compliance, yes sir, no sir, and make sure that you have another day.
That's it.
Yeah.
Make sure you have another day.
Got you.
I agree.
All right. Well,
Good advice.
we are about a quarter after the hour. This has been very, very fruitful. I do want to give Chief Hawthorne a last closing thought, if you have, and then I'm going to do the same for Mr. Washington. And Mr. Washington, also for those out there who may want or need your services in the future, we'll give you an opportunity to share your information so we can have that. So, Chief Hawthorne, before we let you go, any closing statement?
Well, I love the program. I love what we talk about. I love to come back. We could spend hours on this. We'd love
Yes,
to
we
come back
can.
sometime and talk about our rights in terms of what is reasonable suspicion, what is probable cause, what do the police have a right to do, where do they cross the line, so that if you're out there in that situation, you know exactly what your rights are and what the police rights are, what their limits are in that type of situation. So I love to come back and do an actual class, walk through some case studies, so that we could come back and talk about some of that. But I think the most important lesson for today is do everything in your power to survive the moment, survive the situation, because that is going to be in your best interest. Let me as the chief handle the bad apple. Let Mr. Washington handle the complaint and file the complaint and get legal action that way, but survive the encounter to be able to talk about it.
Right.
All right, thank you very much, Chief. We appreciate you. We're definitely going to have you back for that next conversation.
Okay.
All right, you have a good evening.
All right.
Okay. All right, Mr. Washington, thank you very much for your patience, and we'll have you to make any closing comments, including how to contact you for those who are listening if they need you in the future.
But first of all, I'm based out of Dallas. My office number is 214-880-4883. My website is www.dwashlawfirm. That's DWASH lawfirm.com. I can't really add on much to what Chief said.
What is your phone number again? What is your phone number again, Mr. Washington?
214-880-4883.
Okay.
I really can't add on too much to what Chief just said. I mean, the biggest thing I'm going to say is for people just to continue to be a part of the process. I need your help. We need your help. And the only way we're going to really change the system is if we all unite together and come together and just demand change. That's the only way we're going to be able to do it, man. But again, my goal and my job is to make sure that I can do whatever I can to change the system. Tommy, you said something, both you and JR said something. You talked about being on a dark road and you confront it, or you're dealing with a bad police officer.
Yes.
I mean, there's times where I tell people call 911, or keep driving until you get to a well-lit area where
That's
there
what
are
I
other
did.
people around. Just do whatever you can, but do it the right way. Don't be speeding away. Call 911. Let them know what you're doing. Let them know that you're driving to a well-lit area, so that hopefully they're gonna alert that officer that you are talking to somebody else as well. Turn on that camera. Every phone has a camera. Turn it on. Put it on the dashboard. Get your video for inside your car. Just do whatever you need to do to be proactive. And again, as I said earlier, if I'm going to have these cases, I want to be able to go after a police officer with my clients alive. I want to do whatever I can to try to save lives, and that's about all I can really offer. I do appreciate being a part of this show, and thank you, man, for keeping this conversation going. And I hope
No,
you
we're going
guys
to have you
continue to keep
back.
this
So this is
conversation
not the
going.
end of it.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is not
absolutely.
the end of it, Mr. Washington. We're going to have you back because we need to continue to talk about this to make as many people aware as possible how to survive these encounters. I mean, I had one of those experiences. Pulled over. I drove because the news was reporting that there were fake cops out there pulling people over. So to drive to a space that was lit, I did that. When the cop got me out the car, he pulled his gun on me. He told me he was going to shoot me, and I was like, "For what?" He's like, "For failing to render or failing to stop." I was like, "Hey, this road is dark. I just want to pull over. You're going to write me a ticket. You can write me a ticket on this light pole as opposed to write me a ticket on a dark road." Yeah,
Right.
I went to jail that day, but I didn't do anything for his hands because he had his gun out. I'm like, I don't know what for, but yet my hands are clear. I put them in front of me. You're going to arrest me? Go ahead and arrest me. I'll go deal with this. So my wife and I filed a complaint afterwards. Didn't go anywhere. This is the city of Garland, not to embarrass Garland, but you know, when you got half the people in the cell, in the holding cell in there for assaulting the police simply for cursing at them, that kind of lets you know what kind of city police Garland is.
Gotcha.
Right.
All right, Jimmy. Well, we have went over a few minutes, but I think it was definitely
We
well
did,
worth.
so but we're okay. This is a good
It
show for the archive.
definitely well worth it. And again, Mr. Washington, we appreciate your time. We're definitely going to have you back. There's a lot to talk about here, Jimmy. And is there anything else, Jimmy, before we close out tonight's show?
That's it. So we're a little
All
over,
right.
so we're gonna go ahead and close the show.
All
Stick
right.
around, guys, if you guys want to talk afterwards.
Until next week.